So I'm so glad that you all are gathered here together so that we can talk about being a part. And you know Thelma Jean and you know Tom, and you may not know that Thelma Jean is a therapist who's also on the faculty of the Institute for Spirituality and Health at the Texas Medical Center, and has been involved in the McGovern Center for Health and Humanities, works with them, and is just an amazing human. You knew that part. You knew she was an amazing human, but she's also got lots of other credentials. And Tom Cole, in addition to being an amazing human. Uh-oh. Somebody's getting an alert.
You have an alert too?
It's an alert about what the water system, and they're lifting the boiling thing. But they give you information about what to do with your water system.
Isn't it great? They give you that horrible sound in order to tell you everything's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tom has just been ordained as a Jewish spiritual director, and he is the director of the McGovern Center for Humanities and Ethics. And he's written many books. And if you haven't read any of them, I commend them to you. I've read the Old Man book. What's the name of it, Tom?
Old Man Country.
Old Man Country. And I have read the one about, oh my goodness, you all, this is how I know these weeks have been traumatic, is my brain doesn't work. It doesn't work. The Strange Demise of Jim Crow. I've read the book, and it's called
No Color's My Kind.
That's it. So I can commend those to you personally. And they're here with us to help us talk to each other and hear each other. And I've been asked to open with a blessing. And what I have found on Zoom is that eyes wide open blessings just make more sense. So here's an eyes wide open blessing. May God bless our time together and show us through our sharing how very connected we are to each other. Amen.
Amen.
Tom and Thelma Jean, thank you so much. And we are ready to hear from you.
Thank you. First, I want to tell you our schedule today. We'll stay together in this group until about 3:35, and then we'll have a 10-minute break. And when you come back from your break, it'll be 3:45, and Zoom will have put us in small group. And the small groups will have a little structure that we provided that Laura's going to put on some way, put up there for you all to see, and to help guide the small group discussion if you choose to use it. And then we'll all get back together again at 4:15 and have an ending discussion together. And now, Tom.
So I just have a little bit of context, some data, and it's basically the Thelma Jean show, which you all are very fortunate that it is. So just a little bit of background. Some people have said that we are suffering through a pandemic of loneliness as well as a pandemic of COVID. I think there's a lot of truth to that. But it goes back much farther, even than the beginning of the pandemic. Historically, you date it from the middle of the 20th century when people are writing books like The Lonely Crowd or The Lonely Man of Faith or Man is Not Alone, the kinds of things that testify that people's sense of isolation, of the decline of certain kinds of ties was already beginning after, we see the triumph of science, declining church attendance, declining authority of ministers, and so on. So this is a sad truth that long predates COVID. And like all sad truths, it leaves open room for possibilities and new things. So let me just give you a little bit of data on the current situation. There was one survey that was done first in 2018 and then 2020, and it showed a 13% increase in loneliness just in those 2 years. So what we're seeing is now an exacerbation of that. nearly half of the American population finds themselves feeling alone, sometimes or always. 1 in 4 feel like there's not anyone who really understands them. 2 in 5 that their relationships are not meaningful. They feel isolated. And this is the toughest really on the Generation Z, the 18 to 22-year-olds. And they are not represented in our group. But one of the thoughts I've had, and actually I haven't shared this yet, is, I have my medical students who want to call elders in nursing homes to establish contact. I think the reverse may well be true, that we could get older volunteers to call younger people and listen to their stories and so on. So health consequences. After 50, isolation and loneliness dramatically increase your risk of premature death. Heart disease, stroke, anxiety, depression. The UK in 2018 created a cabinet post known as the Minister for Loneliness. And you might think that's a silly thing, but it's a public health problem, right? It's not just I'm lonely, you're lonely, we're lonely. No, these are public health issues. And I think they're getting out in front of this with the idea of a loneliness strategy for improving people's sense of connection and improving public health. So all of this, 1 in 5 of the Brits that were surveyed feel like they're often or only alone, which is not that different from us. So what we found now, the exacerbation that's taking place in the epidemic, from the shutdowns, lockdowns, self-isolation, social distancing, these have dramatically increased feelings of isolation and loneliness. So that's really my background, and the real good news is coming from Thelma Jean.
Let me suggest that you write down a word or remember, just choose a word and remember it if you don't have something to write on. A word that for you tells what is the most hard thing for you brought about by the lockdown and the separation that's resulted. Just so that can help you focus on what you want to listen for today to each other and to us. That might be helpful in that particular area. We've had different stressors over the long length of this pandemic. Remember at the beginning, it was the fright about, are we going to find toilet paper? Are we going to find paper towels? Are we going to find those Clorox surface wipes? And there was keeping everything germ-free. You can't bring your groceries in to the house until you've wiped them all down outside. And then we're focused on masks and keeping them clean. How are you supposed to wash them? How long can you wear them? What about all those people that aren't wearing them? That became the big focus, along with being, like, well, what are we going to do without travel? What are we going to do without restaurants? What are we going to do without church? Over time, some of these things changed. Some we found workarounds for. We started doing takeout at restaurants. Some of those things changed, went away. They changed their instructions about them for us. And church by Zoom. Let me just say that I'm so glad that we have church by Zoom. I'm so glad to be able to hear Laura still and sometimes hear the choir. But I miss so much being in community, in a community of faith, being together, feeling the sounds of your voice and the sound and the feel of what it's like to be a crowd together in there. I told Fran I miss seeing her so much. I had to collect all the cards I have from her and I set them around me and the plants she gave me, so that I'm like a child with their stuffed toys. I have to have signs of Fran to keep close to me so I can soothe myself. It's just terrible to be away from people that matter so much. And even brief exchanges in the coffee hour mean so much and cast, for me anyway, cast a very long light over the rest of the week. And I miss that. So regardless of what did change from the beginning of our lockdown until now, it's not the isolation. We have been stuck with that all along, and it is so bad for us. It's not just that connection is fun. It's so bad for us not to be connected that it is a big risk factor for depression and for cognitive decline, as Tom was saying. Connection is necessary for us, for our minds and bodies to function correctly. That's how we're made. In fact, for a long time, psychologists conceptualized the self as kind of like a nugget, a little hard nugget that was, housed here, or our hearts, or it varied where they put it. And that was going to, direct us through our days. That's not the favored concept anymore. Now psychologists refer to the self as self in relation. If you've never seen it written out, it's self in relation. Self in relation, that's the self. Instead of a nugget, the self has some fluidity. It's not a hard little stable thing. And how we act and feel depends on who we're acting and feeling with. Different people bring out different aspects of our behavior and emotion. And of course, at the same time, we're bringing out different aspects of theirs. So when the pandemic separates us from most of the people we know, we are without a lot of ourself, a lot of how we're used to being, how we know ourselves to be, doesn't have a way to be that way. There's no way for it to show itself. And so we start to feel one-dimensional. And our grieving starts there. We miss ourselves. As someone said to me last week, I don't know who I am without the children I teach. And during this virtual time, I don't really have them. I'm lost. Yes, she is, and so are they. They don't have her either. Isolation magnifies another kind of loss, the loss of loved ones by death. That loss looms large before us in isolation. And isolation strains us by forcing us to examine how satisfied we are with the relationships that are meaningful to us, that we know well enough to still see, that live in the house with us, a child, a partner, a parent, some other relative or friend that's living with us. Isolation can strain those relationships by enforcing more cooperation than we're used to having to give. Frustration with how things are shut down at work and the loss of those relationships can also add strain to us that can wash over onto those relationships around us that we're living with. Further, the lockdown has erased an entire category of friends, people that sociologists call weak ties, favorite waiters, favorite barbers, people we regularly see at Minute Maid Park, acquaintances at the gym. These are people we don't know well, but they give us a sense that we're moving through a community. We don't just need our inner circle, we need our outer circle too, in order to be well-grounded and healthy. Yes, studies show that these weak ties bolster health. They matter that much. And we don't have them now. So I want to talk about stress for a minute. A lot of our reaction to isolation can be categorized as stress, just a general feeling of dis-ease in our body and mind. Since it's a major cause of disease, all disease, we must be mindful about the stress we allow ourselves to have. Where we put our mind is where we put our body. A major researcher on the power of the mind is Dr. Ellen Langer at Harvard. She's done so much research, 40 years worth. And I just want to tell you 3 or 4 things that illustrate the power of the mind. She put a dozen old men into a house and asked them to live together for a week. Asked them to think of themselves as 20 years younger and to listen to the music. She had the house fixed up with music from 20 years ago, newsreels from 20 years ago. She asked them to speak in the present tense, but to be talking about things that were going on 20 years ago. After a week together, tests showed that everything had improved. Their vision has improved, their memory had improved, their hearing had improved, their appearance had improved, their blood pressure had improved, all of their functioning, all the physiological functions and daily functions had improved. The power of the mind. She did a chambermaid study. She got a group of chambermaids. She must have gone over to London. I'd never heard of chambermaids over here. And she got a group of them together that were about to go to various places to work. And she put them in 2 randomized groups. And in this group, she said, you know, the housework you're about to do is going to count as exercise. It's so strenuous. And it uses all your limbs, and you carry things. It's like weights. And it's going to be just as if you've exercised all day and done strength training too besides. And the other group, she didn't tell anything like that. And then she put all the group together and she said, this is how you make a bed. This is how you set the table. This is how you vacuum, like that. Then they went out and did their work for a week. When they came back, tests showed that the chambermaids that thought they were exercising all day were more fit, stronger, their balance improved, they had higher energy, and they had more endurance. I just think that's terrific. And this is my favorite. She did some sleep studies, and people came into a sleep lab so that they could test what the relationship is between the amount of sleep you get and how you feel the next day. So what she did was jack around with the clock. So some people thought they were getting exactly the amount of sleep that was true. Some people thought they were getting less sleep than they actually got because the clock was off. And some people thought they were getting more sleep than they actually got because the clock was off. Then she tested all of them, and she found that your cognitive skills and how rested you feel does not depend on the truth. It depends on your perception. And if you think you got plenty of sleep, you feel fine. If you think you didn't, but you actually did, you feel tired and sluggish and drag around. So I think that's so useful, because when I don't sleep well, I just tell myself, look, that doesn't count, because she proved all I have to do is think I'm rested. So see, you can already let yourself start using some of this into correcting your thinking into a less stressful way to think, which is the point of why I was telling you all this, because she urges us to increase how mindful we are about what we're thinking, to pay more attention to what we're thinking and how it's affecting how we're feeling and how different we could think, to be creative in finding another way to think about a situation. So she says, always ask yourself, how might I understand this differently? How could I interpret this differently? That's being mindful about what's going on in our minds and taking responsibility for making it the most soothing, the most calming, the most open to possibility way we could think about whatever situation it is. So now for just a few minutes on how we can help ourselves be less stressed. How can we soothe ourselves? How can we calm our neurological system when it becomes overactive and alarmed and starts throwing catastrophic thinking into our heads? One of the good ways to soothe ourselves is a breathing exercise called 636. And I'd like to invite you to do it with me. You breathe in for the count of 6, then you hold your breath for the count of 3, and then you breathe out again to the count of 6. But the breathing out has got to be very slow. So do it with me. And so you'll notice that I count the out breaths more slowly. Okay, breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold it. 1, 2, 3. Now breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 3, 6. Now you know what you just did. You lowered your blood pressure, you lowered your heart rate, and you stopped the flow of stress hormones that were racing through your blood system. So good for you. Now you are more relaxed. Another good one is to take a 20-minute walk outside, looking at trees and grass and plants and letting that view of nature do its magical healing, and letting the movement of your body release the tension that your body's holding. Another one is to take yourself mentally to a safe place, to have a little retreat. So if you want to, if you'll close your eyes, I'll guide you to that and show you how to create it, and then it belongs to you. So just relax in your chair if you want to do this. Relax in your chair, close your eyes, breathe normally. And see yourself walking on a path. It's through maybe a field, a beautiful field. The weather's nice. It's a safe place. And then you see a place that draws you towards it. It might be a shelter on the beach, a cabin in the woods, a house on a mountaintop. Might be something else that maybe someplace you've been to before that you love. So go to that place, a new one or an old one. And if it has an inside, go inside. If it doesn't, just be comfortable at the outside of it. And notice the sights that you see, what makes you love being there. Listen to the sounds. Maybe it's birds, maybe it's water, a brook flowing, or the ocean. Might be wind blowing through the trees. What sounds? What can you smell there? What flowers or trees or plants or animals or cooking is giving some smells? What's the texture? Is it sandy? Is it rocky? Is it inside, maybe a soft rug? Is it a rough blanket that feels so nice close to you? How are you feeling there? Peaceful, safe, content? Locate that feeling in your heart. That feeling you have there, let it rest in your heart. Now put your hand over your heart and hold it there. Hold your hand over your heart. You're anchoring that good feeling in your heart. Keep feeling that good feeling as you picture yourself here at the workshop. Picture what you see when you will open your eyes, still with your hand over your heart. And when you are ready, open your eyes and bring that feeling with you in your heart. Anytime you want to feel better, you can take yourself to that retreat. You might go more slowly than we were able to do today, but you can take yourself there and take yourself through all the senses to bring it all close to you. If you don't have time or you're not in a position to do the long visualization, you can just put your hand over your heart and bring back those feelings you've anchored there. Your hand over your heart will help recall them and move that feeling back into your consciousness, into your body, all your body, and soothe yourself that way. Change your nervous state, your stressed state, your troubled state into that peaceful place. Finally, we can hold on to these words from Pastor Steve Garnaas Holmes. We can let these take the place of catastrophic thinking. He wrote them in response to Psalm 105, a verse from that psalm. The verse is, "They asked and you brought quails and gave them food from heaven in abundance." Pastor Steve wrote, "The resilience that will get you through the worst troubles is not inner strength, but simple trust that in every moment, no matter how dire, there is grace enough to get you through the worst troubles." So now it's time for us to take a break. We've got a couple of minutes before we thought we would go. Just if anyone would like to say something, ask something, tell something, that would be great. Tom, are you here to hear?
I'm here.
Okay. Most everybody's muted, so unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Well, thank you, Thelma Jean. I want one housekeeping. I just put the questions that we'll use in small group in the chat, and I also put my phone number. So if something's going wrong for you technologically, you now have my cell phone number. But I've done each of these, Thelma Jean. I didn't know the 636, but I knew a version of it, and I have found just taking some deep breaths to really help with the catastrophic thinking, which is not something I had a problem with really pre-pandemic, but boy, do I now. And the retreat was really lovely. I hadn't done that quite that way. And that's helpful to me. Thank you.
I'm glad.
I will say, Thelma Jean, I would never have been able to believe that 30 minutes listening to your talking and breathing exercises, that I would have felt the sense of peace that I do now. It's far surpasses what intellectually I would have been able to comprehend. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad that happened for you.
I completely agree. I think we're probably all a little more fragile than we realize, given the week we've just experienced. And I mean, we were already fragile, but
Troubles on top of troubles.
yeah. So Thelma Jean, I've just been close to tears the whole time. And I think it's just, like Jay said, I'm feeling so calm.
Good.
Thank you.
So shall we take a break and then return in our small groups?
And I'll go ahead and send the small group thing out. And then Thelma Jean, you want everybody to come back at 3. What time do you want everybody to come back for their small group time?
3:45.
3:45. Can everybody see the chat, which is where your questions for small group are? Anybody having any trouble before we go away? Okay. Yes, we're ready.
That's good, good. So we thought for the last few minutes, we would harvest the comments, share what from each group were the most prominent experiences or ideas or feelings. I have to say, in our group and in general, I've been feeling the enormity of the world's grief. And Jim talked about that in particular when it comes to losing friends, losing members of the of Covenant, and not being able to mourn in person, not being able to celebrate in person. And I think the ability to share our grief here is one of the functions of the session, right? So I know we both appreciate that. And we both shed our share of tears. I have to say there's such a plurality of emotions that came up in our group, that's from fear and gratitude to rage to sadness to impotence. All these things kind of competing with each other at different moments. Kathleen talked about fear of dying because she was so cold, or her rage or gratitude or concern for others. I think it's really quite amazing how articulate we are able to be and how much that helps us personally and in the group. So we learn from each other. We're not alone. So what were some of your prominent experiences or from your groups? Leanne, Jane Ann.
Yeah, I realize that I walk around unsettled all the time. The place I'm the most settled is at work. But I think I didn't talk about this during our breakout room, but I just know, like, around the time of the inauguration, I would just burst into tears, just cry without any like specific thought associated with it. Just feeling overwhelmed by my feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, overwhelmed is the key word, isn't it? Overwhelmed on the one hand, and then not quite able to admit it or feel it on the other. Mm-hmm. Like Laura talked about this, it's like we're kind of on the edge. We don't know how fragile we are. And then in a group like this, we're able to feel it or share with each other.
Yeah.
Paul, yeah.
I got a sense from our group, sense of loss of individuals that we've known and couldn't say goodbye to,
Mhm.
couldn't see one last time, and no longer walk the earth, and we're never going to see them physically again. And just an overarching sense of loss of things going well, of things going right, of a settled sense of continuity and community, and a fear that may never come back.
Tim.
Yeah, in our group, there was a surprising appreciation for Zoom when we were answering the last question. Several folks who are relatively new were saying, boy, they go to, 3 or 4 of these a week, and they've gotten to know people. And I was remembering, just because, no, first of all, I think we all agree Zoom is not a substitute for face-to-face. I mean, that's not what they were saying. But I can remember seeing people whose faces were familiar in the sanctuary and having a brief, impossible to hear conversation in the narthex and tricking myself into thinking I knew them when I don't know them at all. That's one reason, by the way, I really love the spiritual journey things we do, because then, oh my God, I thought I knew that person. But there was a surprising appreciation for Zoom. And one of the features of it is there's people we're connected to that aren't around, that are miles away or that haven't been coming. So that's a plus. And I'm not saying I'm not very eager to be back together. But that was several people expressed that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the upsides that we can appreciate and turn to. So Karen, I haven't ever met you, but is your son David?
Yes, he is.
David?
And every time that he always says, have you met Tom Cole? Have you talked to him? Does he know that you're my mother? so it's nice to meet you, Tom.
David has a PhD from Rice in religious studies, and was a colleague of mine. We worked together as teachers and doing some research, and he always talked about you guys and was glad when you were going to move to Houston. And I'm sure he gave you Covenant as the place to go.
He did.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. So
give him a big hug from me.
I will. Thank you so much. And I know he would return the greeting.
And everybody else, you'll remember David and Hannah and their 2 little kiddos, Winnie and Theo. That's who we're talking about. And David was guest proclaimer not long ago, because we can do that now that we're not need to be in the same city. So he was guest proclaimer from Knoxville. It feels like not long ago. It's been a couple months, I guess.
Yeah.
And you can hear my children in the background. I talked in our group about, I'm just never alone, ever, never, ever alone. The dogs go to the bathroom with me. I'm just never alone. So that's just a big change from a year ago. And, finding strategies, finding ways to make room for imagination, which I think is one of the things I didn't realize that being alone did for me. It's when I miss my commute to work because I was alone the whole way and then alone the whole way back. And I would just think or listen to NPR, which would make me think. Anyway, so we, everybody talked about different experiences. but it's interesting to hear strategies from other folks and ways they're coping and adopt some of those ideas for myself. So I'm grateful.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because it's the flip side of what you would often expect, right? People feeling lonely from being alone, but also people you can feel like you lost your aloneness, right? Because of the changed situation. So it's complicated. But yeah, I hope you can find alone times or alone spaces even. Jim was sharing with us a meditation he does that I found very soothing and impressive. I think David Ramsey is back there with his hand.
One of the advantages of being a morning person and being married to a night person is that even though I'm working from home, I get plenty of alone time. And Janice does too.
One of the things that we acknowledged, that we talked about in our group, was acknowledging that even though we're not physically seeing each other, we still have the luxury of being able to communicate in a fairly immediate fashion. And we talked about thinking about immigrants, people from long ago, who their only means of communicating with family and friends was letters. And if they were communicating with family or people across the ocean where they immigrated from, it could be months in between sending a letter and receiving a reply. And so much could change in that amount of time. That sort of figured into a couple things that we were talking about.
I wanted to add, I'm a psychiatrist, and I had 2 different patients with autism who told me that they've been in training their whole lives for the pandemic. You know, they're most comfortable when they're alone. And so the pandemic was the perfect situation for them.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Have you seen those memes about Gen Xers, which is my generation, that this is what we've been preparing for all our lives? Because we were the latchkey kid generation, right? Our parents didn't care about us. Anyway, we're all fine. We're just fine.
I think Susan had a thought.
What I'm grateful for is I'm grateful for one aspect of the pandemic. And that is, before the pandemic, it was very difficult for me to communicate with my 2 grandchildren, who are 12 and 10. Because they were always busy with friends, going out to friends' house, friends coming over, you know, it was just hard to find a time when I could have an extended conversation with them. But once we all closed down, I've figured out 2 different clubs for my grandchildren. My grandson is 12 and he started playing saxophone last year in band, and he doesn't have band this year, but his parents actually stopped renting the sax and bought it. And so he and I found an easy cello saxophone duet book. And so we have an hour together with each other 2 times a week. Now it's Monday and Friday, and we just get together and on Zoom and we play music together. And I sort of function as, I know nothing about the saxophone, but I do know about musicianship. And so I can give him he counts us in, for example, and if it's at 4, well, anyway, I don't have to go into detail anyway. So we were having fun doing that, and he's getting better. And then my granddaughter likes to bake. So we have a baking club. One week I teach her how to make one thing, and next week she teaches me how to make something. And we've been doing this for every week since spring. So we have quite a little cookbook put together of the recipes we've shared. It's fun.
Mostly sweets.
Well, from when Ayla suggests something, it's sweets. When I suggest something, it's got a healthy component. But anyway, it's just been fun.
Well, maybe you can share them with Covenant in the newsletter.
Oh, what? The recipes?
Mm-hmm.
Do something in the Blue Tiger Project.
Oh, that's a thought.
And
Yeah.
while I'm talking, I'm sorry, everybody. I was trying to be funny, and I know you all love the children in your lives and the children that are in your lives now. And I meant to be making a joke, but it's not funny, and I'm sorry.
No.
It's okay. I wouldn't want to have my grandchildren around all the time. No way.
Oh, well, my joke about Generation X is what I meant. My own
Oh,
children. You can think what you think about my my not wanting to be with my own children every second of every day. I
Laura,
love them.
no excuses allowed in this group. Right? We accept and love what we hear from you as well as anyone else. So John, I owe you an apology since you reached out by email to me months ago and I never responded. And I never expected to see you look like a bearded wonder. But you definitely look more handsome.
You know, we were talking about communication. I don't know if you can see this. The postscript, the stamp on it is July 11th, 1929. And it's a letter from my dad to my mom. And it ends, but wait 54 hours and then I can tell you that all this holding you in my arms with your darling Ronas. So there you go. They could communicate.
Oh, lovely.
It's in handwriting.
Lovely. Yeah.
My sister sent it to me.
Any other thoughts or feelings to be shared or?
Thank you for doing this, Tom. You know,
Well, this is Thelma Jean's creation. And when Jay said he couldn't believe how after a half an hour he would feel so calm, and it had nothing to do with his head, it had to do with his heart. This is why when I come to Covenant and you see me in the pews on some Sunday mornings, I am so calm. So calm.
It is an interesting experience on Sunday where we have videos. And maybe you've heard me say this before. I'm always doing an inventory. You have to recognize people from the back of their head. And there's an amazing number of people who are no longer with us who are in those videos. And that's, you know, food for contemplation.
Well, we are grateful to have the chance and for the Covenant community to be able to sponsor this. And I think Thelma Jean wants to take us out with a prayer.
Thelma Jean, before you do that, Kathleen put in chat that she's going to take forward Jim's words right now. It's like this. Jim, will you tell us what that is?
Yeah, I was just saying that one of the meditations I did, it's a guided meditation, is a mantra that I have come away with is, right now, it's like this. And the significance of that statement is that you reduce suffering because you embrace things as they are. It doesn't mean that you capitulate or that you don't seek from a position of equanimity to seek the next best solution, but you accept that right now it's like this.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Tom and Thelma Jean. Thank you, Jim, and everybody. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for participating. Am I on?
Mhm.
This is a prayer by Pastor Steve, again, Steve Carnos Holmes, that I think is very moving. I'd like to share it with you. My child, I see you weary and weighed in the slow catastrophe, carrying the wreckage with you. I know your longing, the loneliness, the empty place. Beloved, you are doing a hard thing. Try to be as kind to yourself as I am. Forgive yourself. Appreciate your resilience. Give thanks for what has sustained you. You are weary as you ought to be. Give yourself permission to savor what renews you. You are grieving for a horizon that always walks ahead of you, for a touch you can't have. Let yourself mourn. Let the sky hear. The earth knows your song. Be gentle with yourself, beloved. You are doing a hard thing. I am with you. I believe in you. This is my word to you on this long road. We will make it through. We will make it through. Amen. Be safe and warm, and we have water again.
Thank you. So good to be with all of you.
Yes.
Thanks
So
so
good
much.
to be with all.